Right, Alex, tip number 4, please.
Yeah, tip number 4. So again, orientated around translating the academic curriculum, and you could call it literacy if you like. It's just a minute. So just a minute. People might be familiar with the radio show, Just a Minute. Actually, it's an adaptation of that original, kind of decades-old radio show, and it's really, really simple. It is, in effect, can you talk for just a minute about a particular concept, about a particular word, about a particular topic, about something we taught for any period of time? So let me, again, unpick what kind of ingredients of that, and then the structural thing of how you do it and why you might do it and how you might vary it. So I think for me, just a minute is about self-explanation. It's challenging people to explain and connect up their ideas and communicate that verbally, and the challenge of that. It's also about that elaboration. Again, when you're asked to speak for something for a minute, it's actually quite a challenging amount of time. It's not for you or I, because we're on podcasts all the time, so we practice this for a living. But for our pupils in class, they don't normally speak for any more than a period of seconds. So a minute is a real challenge to elaborate upon that. And actually, to speak for a minute about any term, could be romantic poetry, it could be area and perimeter, is a real challenge. And actually, you can't just enter into this randomly. You're thinking really hard about what we're talking for just a minute about. Examples come and go. And then for me, I think it's also potentially about retrieval, because if you're talking for just a minute, you're often recalling what you've been getting taught for a period of days or weeks. And there's an element of reasoning there as well. And sometimes you want to scaffold the just a minute and give them prompts and give them a bit of a structure if you want some specific reasoning to emerge out of that. So when it comes to those ingredients, self-explanation, retrieval, reasoning, elaboration, you can see how this is drawing upon quite a lot of rich theme of learning for me. But it's a challenge. So just to give real specifics about it. So we do just a minute. I'd rarely do it for every pupil in the class, because if you think about the reality of that, it takes about half an hour to do that well. So that would be a rare occurrence, although I have done that before, but only it's a rare occurrence. And I'd use that as effectively a bit more of a speaking listening assessment and a confidence builder. But typically I'd use just a minute at the openings of lessons or at the ends of lessons, in truth anywhere in between, but mainly at the opening at the end. And I'd select 2 or 3 pupils to do this. And we'd train as a class, so we'd know what just a minute was, so I wouldn't have to kind of elaborate every time. But effectively, we begin the lesson, it might be the word metaphor. We've been teaching the word metaphor in English. It might be the Industrial Revolution in history. It might be what caused the Great Fire of London in year 2. And we give them the structure. Okay, we're going to use a timer for the minute. And some teachers and some of us like to use kind of digital, and it's on the screen. There's a bomb at the end. But actually, I like to keep it really lo-fi and just, check it on my phone or watch or whatever else. And actually, the point is we give them the minute structure, and you can add in specific kind of parameters. So typically, I don't want you to repeat anything. I don't want you to use fillers. And if you stop, then it's game over. So I would use it as a 3 strikes you're out basis. Now, can you do it with fillers? Yes, you can. Would some pupils need that? Yes, they would. So there's a set of variations here that you need to intelligently use. But once you train pupils up, they get the idea. Effectively, they can't cheat by repeating themselves. They can't use the same kind of definition, slightly variation of wording. Effectively, you're asking them to explain something themselves, and in so doing, reveal their knowledge. And also, pupils are listening, and so there's a bit of consolidation, although I would say pupils are mainly listening for errors and listening for stops. And one of the things, for me, why it's a useful diagnostic, if I've picked 3 pupils at the end of a lesson, or at the start, actually, I'd think who those 3 pupils are. And I'd think about kind of where I'd expect their knowledge to be, that classic kind of, and I'm not saying top, middle and bottom, but I'm also not saying I wouldn't be so random either. I'm thinking about, right, if Freya's got it, I'm hoping she can speak for a good 40 seconds about this and make some good connections. So I'd use it as a diagnostic. That'd be a bit representative of the group, but I'd also use it as a consolidation opportunity, because they're hearing, things we've talked about, and hopefully there's a bit of retrieval there, and done really well. There's sometimes even a better explanation than what we had the first time. So for me, it's a bit of diagnostic. Also, baked into it is the fact that some people's only speak for 20 seconds. And that's the thing where this can be done in 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, or it can be done in 20 minutes. And I'm always really conscious of making sure tasks and tips are adaptable for time parameters that we've got. But if we're just using 3 or 4 minutes and just two pupils, we might not go for the whole pauses, repetitions. It might just really be about a way to get them to elaborate and explain and give an answer, but within a structure that they're familiar with and happy with. I think for me, the just a minute, for some pupils, speaking for 15 seconds is an achievement, is a big success. So I'm so often really sensitive to that and would know when that's happening and kind of manage it accordingly. Some pupils without preparation time would panic at this. So I'm conscious of individual pupils. I work with a primary school in Nottingham Way called Jubilee Academy, and we work with some young children who some children EAL and kind of just can come from Hong Kong and Ukraine, where their language is still developing rapidly, but developing, and some pupils who don't have that ability to speak in that kind of elaborated way in the classroom. Just a minute, we don't do it in that kind of, we expect a minute and kind of we gamify it in front of everyone. Instead, we just use it as a positive framework, and they might do it with a pair. They might just try just a minute about a topic. And I've been in the same school in a year 5 class. Just a minute was used to recall what happened in the previous chapter of the story the day before. And three pupils, 2 girls and a boy, they gave these responses, and the teacher dotted in a couple of words and ideas to give them a prompt that they wanted them to use. So again, intelligent adaptation, think about your pupils, but the core principles of pupils need to reason, explain, have the confidence to connect ideas and to say that out loud. That's a life skill. It's revealing as a diagnostic. It can be powerful, and I think it's got lots of intelligent variation baked into it.
I love this, Alex, because I have never done this, and I go so far as to say I've never dreamed of doing this. So this is good. So I've got a few questions, a couple that you've covered. So we'll do a couple of quickies first. So you mentioned kind of your more introverted, quieter students, and you just have to be careful of their needs. And I'm assuming this is all about knowing your kids and knowing at what stage they're confident enough to do this. So that's perfect. You also,
just to add to that, just really quickly to add to that. So depending on the topic, depending on the pupil, we might just bake in some practice as well. So again, it's just it's a format that offers a familiarity for high quality structured talk. So, pupils can do this in pairs. That was one of the things in that year 5 class I just mentioned. They did a quick practice where they each had a minute to do it to one another first, and then a few people were selected. So again, if you've got that, knowledge of your pupils, you'll also think about the preparatory work, the practice, the confidence building. I think for me, some of the most powerful memories for me teaching are when pupils who you wouldn't expect, who'd never have the confidence at the start of the year to sit there or stand up and talk, were able to talk really cogently and intelligently about a topic that 3 weeks later they didn't know very much about. And so I think we should also not set limits on our pupils. We should scaffold them to reach to the highest heights in our classroom.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's brilliant. That just on the kind of think time and preparation time, would it ever be the case that you wouldn't give any, that you just say to a child, speak for a minute on metaphors, or is there a kind of a floor that you never go below in terms of prep time?
Yeah, I think there's always a lead in. I can't recall a lack of prep, and where I've worked with schools recently, there's always been some preparatory steps, particularly with young children, but not exclusively. I think if you can, with a mature, confident group who've been teaching a topic, you can open up a lesson in an afternoon with some just a minute. But even then, that looks like there's no preparatory work, but ultimately it's because you've done just a minute before and they know the structure and they know the content, that there's a hidden tacit preparation that's come into the task. I think, of course, the less preparation, the less elaborate the response is often. So sometimes it is important not to kind of over practice, because you want that reality that they don't know a lot. They're not able to speak for a minute. So that's giving them some motivation to listen hard and to try and learn for the next 40 minutes so that they can do that.
Interesting. Notes, Alex, would they be allowed notes with them whilst they're doing their minute?
So that's another example of it depends. So for me, when you're doing it for the first few times, you do a lot of peer work, you do note making, they can have one flashcard, so I think that's where your variation comes in. I would say, what I commonly do is allow a flashcard or not. And there was almost a bit of prestige around not using the flashcard, but you give some pupils the support factor of using that flashcard, and enough of them do that to not feel isolated by doing so. But I would work up the confidence and the capacity for my pupils for them to be able, by whatever point in the school year, to be able to do it without preparation, without support, because ultimately, we don't want to be catching them out, but in the real world, we want them to have that confidence to, in variation of context, be able to speak about topics and talk about it and connect up their ideas. And sometimes you need to, you have those pressured situations. If you can do it in the classroom, you can do it anywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 2 follow-up questions for this, Alex, I hope anyway. The first is, having never done this, obviously.
Yeah.
So God knows why I'm even coming from here. I would imagine that if 3 kids had been picked and I was the 3rd child, I'd end up repeating quite a lot of what child 1 and 2 have said. Do you find that, or is that not a problem?
So again, this is where innovation and adaptation, you can think a little bit carefully about that. So again, you can imagine how the 3rd person has got some extra support factors because they've listened for an extra 2 minutes. They're going to crib some ideas. So I might, in thinking about who my 3 are, think carefully about that sequence. And I'd often put a pupil in 3rd who I thought might find it a bit harder than the person going first, but I factor that in to their responses. So again, this is about that fine filter of kind of diagnosing what they know, what they're copying. And actually, if that 3rd person did elaborate and borrow the best ideas, great. I mean, that's not bad. But I might do some probing with them to check they're not just parroting as well. So that's where you can follow up with some questions. It's a really good question, because I think what we're not treating what minute as is an ideal diagnosis of all their knowledge and understanding. So, but I think it's a meaningful kind of attempt at trying to connect up, their knowledge and be able to elaborate upon it.
Got it. And final question on this, Alex. What do you do with the kids' response afterwards? Do you then kind of analyze it for the whole class, or like bring in another child? Emma, what did you like about what Ben said? How does that play out?
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're doing helpfully, Craig, is colouring in all the potential adaptations and additions for it. So if I was doing it at the start of a lesson to kind of initiate some retrieval, kind of bring some things back into our thinking and to get them looking back at their book, that might be one of the support factors. Okay, you've got 2 minutes to look back through your notes, and then we're going to do just a minute on X. Then it might be, okay, really, you did 40 seconds, I might what was missing from that? What could have James added to reach a minute and beyond a minute? And that's where, again, it's a bit about responsive teaching, isn't it? About kind of what you're looking to glean from it. Normally, it wouldn't just be a kind of shot in the dark, 3 of you gone and then we all go home. It would be a 3 of you, okay, from that pattern of a trio, everyone, what are we thinking of the key concepts we want to be remembering? And if you're going to do just a minute on Friday about this, what type of thing do you think you need to retain by Friday to be able to speak about? So there'd always be, I think, that wraparound and kind of trying to glean what context has emerged from those examples. The best example, or an ideal example, is you get 3 really rich full minutes, and they give slightly different angles on the same topic. They cover off all the misconceptions. They give rich examples, and we all leave, knowingly kind of, I've done a great job. They're all knowledgeable, and we all walk off happy. Seldom does that happen. So actually, it's about being responsive to, well, if 3 of them kind of, fell down at half a minute, and actually clearly they didn't have enough exemplification, or they weren't able to define 1 or 2 of these things that would have allowed them to speak more, then actually I'm being responsive to that. So I think, again, infinite opportunities to respond and adapt depending on what you want pupils to learn and remember. My final little warning sign, I do think they can leave your classroom potentially with who's got the longest speaking, 54 seconds, and who got 12 seconds,
yes,
rather than thinking really hard about the topic that we talked about. So there is a danger of gamifying it too far, and engagement's remembered rather than the actual knowledge you want them to take.
Wow, this is something I'm going to need to think hard about this, Alex. I definitely want to give it a go. I'm definitely nervous, but yeah, I can see this working well. That's brilliant.